What happens when one of country music's biggest legends sits down for what should be a lighthearted, late-night interview only to have the host cross a line that changes everything? Tonight, we're diving into the moment. Reba McEntire made Jimmy Fallon do something nobody ever thought they'd see on live television. This isn't your typical celebrity interview gone wrong. This is something far more intense, far more real, and far more shocking than anything you've seen before. And stick around, because what Reba says at the end will leave you speechless. The Tonight Show was running like clockwork that evening. Jimmy Fallon bounced onto the stage with his usual energy, the band hitting every cue perfectly as the audience cheered. After his monologue and a couple of light sketches, Jimmy settled behind his desk, straightened his tie, and flashed his familiar grin at the camera. Everything felt normal, comfortable, predictable. Then he introduced his next guest, an icon, a woman whose voice had carried heartbreak, strength, and resilience for generations. Reba McEntire walked out to thunderous applause, dressed in an elegant black blazer that shimmered under the studio lights. She waved warmly, her presence commanding without trying. Jimmy stood, hugged her, and they took their seats. The conversation started easily. To her life, decades in music, the loyalty of her fans. Reba spoke with calm confidence, her Oklahoma accent grounding every word. The audience was relaxed, laughing, nodding along. Jimmy leaned forward, smiling, clearly impressed by her career longevity. Then the tone shifted. Jimmy asked about her marriages. The room didn't explode immediately. It just tightened. Reba answered politely, evenly, but something changed in her eyes. Jimmy laughed it off, pushed further, framed it like a joke. The audience chuckled nervously, unsure if they were supposed to. Reba didn't laugh. When Jimmy implied that maybe the failed marriages were on her, the air went out of the room. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reba's posture stiffened, her voice steady but sharpened. She challenged him calmly, directly, and suddenly the playful late-night atmosphere was gone. Jimmy tried to smooth it over with humor. It didn't work. This wasn't a celebrity brushing off an awkward question. This was a woman deciding, in real time, that she wasn't going to be someone else's punchline. The cameras kept rolling. The band stayed silent, and the audience realized they were witnessing something real, raw, and completely unscripted. Reba didn't raise her voice at first. She didn't need to. Her words landed with weight, each one exposing the flaw in Jimmy's just joking defense. She asked him questions he wasn't prepared to answer, about double standards, about respect, about why a woman's personal pain was considered fair game for entertainment. Jimmy grew visibly uncomfortable. He shifted in his chair, smiled less, spoke faster. For the first time that night, he wasn't in control of the room. Reba was. And she wasn't cruel. She was precise. When Jimmy told her she was overreacting, the audience collectively inhaled. That single sentence changed everything. Reba leaned forward, eyes locked on him, and calmly explained why that response was exactly the problem. Decades of interviews, decades of dismissals, decades of being expected to smile through disrespect. Jimmy tried to apologize, but it was clumsy, conditional, wrapped in excuses. Reba called that out too. Not harshly, honestly. She explained the difference between a real apology and one meant to move the show along. The silence in the studio felt heavy, almost uncomfortable to breathe through. Then something unexpected happened. Jimmy stopped performing. His shoulders dropped. His voice softened. He admitted, really admitted, that he had crossed a line, that he hadn't thought deeply enough, that he had prioritized a laugh over a human being sitting inches away from him. Reba listened, arms crossed, not interrupting. She could have walked off. Everyone knew it. Jimmy even asked her to stay, desperation creeping into his voice. Reba stood, paused, and made it clear. This wasn't about humiliation. This was about accountability. She stayed. What followed wasn't a late-night interview anymore. It was a conversation. About heartbreak. About resilience. About choosing growth over bitterness. Reba spoke openly about pain without turning it into spectacle. Jimmy listened, truly listened, asking questions with care instead of punchlines. The audience exhaled. Applause came softer now, more respectful. But beneath the calm, something else was stirring. Jimmy wasn't just reacting to Reba's words. He was confronting something deeper, something he'd been avoiding for a long time. You could see it in his eyes, hear it in the way he paused before speaking. This wasn't over. Not even close. As the conversation deepened, Jimmy's usual rhythm disappeared. No bits, no cue cards, no rush to the next segment. He admitted, on live television, that somewhere along the way, he had stopped being genuine, that the show had become a machine, smooth, successful, but hollow. Reba didn't interrupt. She didn't rescue him either. She told him something simple but devastating. Real connection happens when you stop trying to entertain at someone else's expense. When you choose honesty over safety. That hit Jimmy harder than any criticism ever could. The audience wasn't watching a show anymore. They were witnessing a reckoning. Jimmy confessed that he didn't know how to balance authenticity with entertainment anymore. That he felt trapped by expectations, ratings, routines, the pressure to always be on. Reba challenged him gently. Maybe he didn't need to do both. Maybe he needed to choose. That's when Jimmy said it. He didn't think he could do this anymore. Gasps echoed through the studio. Producers froze. The band stood. Reba looked genuinely shocked. Jimmy explained that the moment wasn't impulsive, it was overdue. That tonight hadn't broken him. It had revealed something he could no longer ignore. He stood up, voice steady now, and said he needed to step away. Not out of anger, out of responsibility. To himself, to his guests, to the people who trusted him with their stories. Reba tried to slow him down, reminding him that big decisions didn't have to be made in moments of pain. Jimmy acknowledged that, but said, some truths only surface when everything goes quiet enough to hear them. He thanked Reba, not politely, deeply. She hadn't come to end a show. She came to promote a tour. But in standing up for herself, she had held up a mirror he couldn't unsee. Jimmy apologized to the crew, the audience, and everyone watching at home. Not theatrically, sincerely. The studio was chaos, but Jimmy was calm. As producers rushed the stage, Jimmy remained centered, almost relieved. He hugged Reba, thanking her again for her courage and honesty. She told him it was a brave choice, not an easy one, but a necessary one. Sometimes bravery and recklessness look the same in the moment. Jimmy addressed the camera one last time. He explained that stepping away wasn't failure, it was accountability. That he wanted to be better, not just entertaining. That real respect mattered more than a perfect show. Then he walked off. The audience didn't know how to react. Some clapped. Some sat frozen. Reba stood alone for a brief moment, then turned to the camera herself. Her voice was calm, steady, and powerful. She reminded viewers that standing up for yourself is never wrong. That real apologies matter. That knowing when something isn't working, and having the courage to change it, is strength. She left the stage quietly. The cameras kept rolling on an empty set, a stunned crew, and an audience that had come for jokes and left with something much heavier. Something real. And that's what made the moment unforgettable. So now I have to ask myself, should I make the next chapter or stop the story here?